You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Episode 141, The Paradox.
Welcome to The Paradox with your attending, Dr. Eric Larson. He is a practicing anesthesiologist and clinical assistant professor at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. Listen in as he takes you behind the scenes of what practicing medicine in today's ever-changing world is like with another doctor. The Paradox is a fun and accidentally informative show for physicians, patients, or anyone who has ever found themselves in a waiting room.
Welcome to The Paradox. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Larson. Thank you for joining me as we explore the U.S. medical system in a fun and informative format through expert analysis. In today's expert, I'm bringing back Mr. John Bush. John runs the Live Free Academy, where he teaches people about cryptocurrency, how to use it, how to hold it, how to trade it, and how to use it in things like decentralized finance, which is one of the things we're going to get into today. I think it's one of the more exciting aspects of cryptocurrency. You can think of traditional finance or centralized finance, which is where you go to a bank or some sort of lending institution, and there you have some sort of collateral. Maybe it's your equity in your home or something like that, and you get a loan at a certain percentage interest rate. Well, if you have cryptocurrency, you can actually do this in a decentralized manner, where you actually go and put up some of your cryptocurrency as collateral, a certain percentage of that, and then you can take a loan out in US dollars or whatever currency you want and use it to spend somewhere, and then you have to pay back that loan at some point, obviously being charged an interest rate. We'll talk about that in the show, which is, I think, a really interesting aspect for people who hold this, maybe businesses who decide to start accepting cryptocurrency. They can use this then to finance things, and it can be a very efficient way of financing things and very cheap compared to traditional financing through a bank, and certainly one in which case there's less upfront fees, application things like you have with a traditional bank. So I think that's very interesting and exciting. John will be hosting a workshop this weekend where you can still sign up. And as I'm recording this, it'll be in just a few days. So it's August 14th and 15th. You can go find out more about that at theparadox.com/crypto. You can usually even access it. If you miss this window, you can go back to his page and probably find a video link and you can pay for the download digitally. I learned a lot about cryptocurrency, enough to the point where I felt comfortable investing it, purchasing it, kind of learning the ins and outs and sort of the pitfalls that you can certainly get into and the horror stories you read about with people with cryptocurrency. So he helped me just get to the point where I at least knew what to look for, what to watch out for, how to protect myself. And it was just a great way to get started and gave me the confidence to do this. And so I wanted to have him on, partly to thank him, but also because I think you provide some real interesting insights. This is obviously just a fraction of what there is to learn, but it's a good, starting point. And the purpose of today's conversation is to talk about some various concepts like decentralized finance, or DeFi, as I mentioned before. John is not sponsoring the show in any way. I'm not receiving anything for going to his course, but I thought this is actually a helpful thing for me, and I thought I'd offer it for you too as an opportunity. If nothing else, just the conversation today, where I think you learn a lot about Bitcoin and generally cryptocurrencies and how they're going to be used in the financial sphere. But who is sponsoring the show is Dr. Erin Wiseman of the Physician Coaching Alliance. Here's her brief message.
Hi, I'm Dr. Erin Wiseman, and I'm here today to talk about Physician Coaching Alliance, otherwise known as PCA. This is a space dedicated to providing stellar coaching for our colleagues so you can do your best work in the world. We believe that in order to change the culture of healthcare as we know it today, all physicians and others working in healthcare need access to coaching. So we can help you find a coach, become a coach, or join our community of coaches to strengthen the work that you're doing. One value that I want to mention that we share in PCA is community over competition, because gone are the days that we see each other as enemy. Instead, we believe working together is the key to success of the individual and the whole. So if you're coaching curious or a coach yourself, come on over to PCA. We'd love to see you there.
Thanks, Erin. Again, you can go to theparadox.com/141. You can get the show notes for today's show. But without further ado, our conversation on decentralized financing with cryptocurrency. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. It's part 2 of The Paradox. I'm here with John Bush, who's the lead instructor at Live Free Academy. He's a cryptocurrency expert. He's been in the space since 2013. He's done lots of work in advocacy for the cryptocurrency space. And he's the one I brought on because I thought for one thing, I took his class, which was fantastic. And it got me to the point where I felt comfortable because I didn't want to just invest in cryptocurrency and, just buy some Bitcoin or something. I wanted to understand it a little bit and understand sort of how to do it safely. And he walked you through that process and helped explain, why to do it and those sorts of things. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to bring us all in so we can kind of understand the space a little bit more. Although, like any even medical space, it's just far, far more vast than you can possibly ever, even take a tiny bite off. All we could do is nibble in an hour or even in 10 hours, I'm sure, really, with all that's going on. Because there are 6, 7, 8,000 cryptocurrencies that exist. I mean, we're sort of just talking about Bitcoin's the main one. But anyway, there's a lot to go over. And John, thanks so much for coming back on the show. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. And the last one we did, I mentioned there was 6,600. Turns out there's 8,700. So different cryptocurrencies.
And probably by the time this comes out, it'll be 9,000, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the interesting things. My son is 15. He's really into F1 racing, and they have their own cryptocurrency. I mean, you're starting to see all these currencies in, I guess, gaming spaces and things like that people use these, and they actually have tradable value. And the whole blockchain technology is really interesting. And I had mentioned last episode, in episode 18, especially when I talked to Dr. Houston, where she wants to try and tie your identity so that you have more control over it as a physician. And you can imagine lots of different people could use that technology to protect their identity online or wherever when you're interacting with software. Like I know people talked about with Facebook and Twitter. And so you can, I guess you're just more protected in general with the online space.
Yep. Yeah. People can do digital identities, and it's like a sovereign digital identity. It's not an ID that's issued to you. Like in the United States of America, for example, they issue the passport. And then for folks that were really far behind on their taxes, they take away people's quote unquote privilege. I'm saying it's a privilege because I think it's a right for people to travel around the United States and around the world, but they take away people's ability to leave the country. So if you had like a sovereign mean no one has control over it, no one has authority over it, but if you had the sovereign digital passport, for example, then it would be harder for people to be controlled and manipulated. We mentioned Cardano in the last episode. It's a cryptocurrency kind of similar to Ethereum. It's one of these programmable cryptocurrencies where people can do smart contracts and write code and do different programs on top of a blockchain. We can talk about decentralized finance like you brought up before. But Cardano is working with some impoverished African nations to bring digital identity to the folks in those countries. And this is important because in some of these African nations that constantly are having dictatorships and a new dictatorship comes in and overthrows the old one, if people are working to amass property, right? Like that's something we take for granted here in the West, just having property rights and having title in assets, money, land, livestock, right? So without that title, which can be put into a blockchain and can't be changed, even though there's a new tyrant in power, without that title, it's really difficult to amass wealth or to lift yourself out of poverty, even if it takes generations to do so. So Cardano, specifically this guy, Charles Hoskinson, is really passionate about bringing identity, bringing title, and bringing property rights to some of these developing nations. And I think that's another really cool use case for blockchain technology.
Yeah, no question. And there's been a lot of talk about one of the main problems and barriers to success financially for many countries in the world is the lack of rule of law and the lack of titles. And like you said, the ability to sort of verify who owns property, especially when you have people who live in shanty towns, right? That they know this is their shack and it has some value. I mean, it may not be a lot, but it's something. And so you have some thug come in, just take it. Well, you can't verify that they were the ones who came and took it. But now if you had some sort of smart contract, like you said, immutable, right, that people can verify, it would certainly be real helpful. And we have a foster son who's no longer living in the house. He's now in his 20s, but he's from Guatemala, and he came, and he's always sending money back to Guatemala, right? This is what all the all the Guatemalans and Hondurans, the Central Americans do. They come here, they earn money, and they send it back through Western Union or some sort of alternative. But all of those cost quite a bit of money, right? It's not cheap to send money because you have to give them your dollars. They charge some fee, and then they convert it into the local currency. In Guatemala, it would be quetzales, and you can definitely see with cryptocurrencies, you can really see that potential, right? You can see the fact that now he can earn $100 here. He pays like 50 cents in fees or whatever, cryptocurrencies, and then suddenly it's converted into that currency for almost no cost, and it saves him 2 hours of work. It depends on how much he makes an hour, and you can definitely see how that would be very helpful for sending resources to other parts of the world, so you're not having to deal with money changers. I don't know what the right term is, but the possibilities, I guess, are almost beyond what you can possibly imagine. Really, it's pretty exciting, I think.
Yep, that's another great use case, the remittance market, and cryptocurrency has the potential. I'm surprised it hasn't faster to really take over a significant market share in the remittance market. The interesting thing, though, is because I've been evangelizing Bitcoin since 2012, 2013, and back in the day, we used to talk about how easy it is to send it costs little to no money, right?
Yeah.
Well, because there's been some growing pains with cryptocurrency, and there's so many people that use Bitcoin specifically, sometimes the transaction fee, the fee to send just one transaction, whether it's $2 or $2,000, can be upwards of $5, $10, $20, $30, right? But the cool thing is that it's not just Bitcoin. For a time, it was just Bitcoin, but now there's multiple different cryptocurrencies. In fact, there's an alternative to Bitcoin that uses the same technology, the same type of blockchain proof of work called Bitcoin Cash. That's definitely a cryptocurrency that costs less than a penny to send. In fact, sometimes I pay my son like little $2 to do a big load of dishes, and I pay him with Bitcoin Cash, and it costs less than a penny. Another great use when it comes to remittances, what if all of a sudden the United States government declared Guatemala some sort of terrorist nation or something, or some other country, right? Or people have family back home, and they stop Western Union from sending the money. Western Union charges like 5 to 7%. Yeah. With cryptocurrency, no government can stop you from sending money anywhere. And I think that's a pretty positive thing.
Yeah, no, I think there are all kinds of possibilities. And so I've got a lot of people who listen to this show who are obviously physicians, but a lot of people who are also in ancillary healthcare services like physical therapists, pharmacists, trainers, chiropractors. And I think what's the case you could make for them why should they not only personally start investing in cryptocurrencies, or at least acquiring it and getting some knowledge of it, but what would your argument be for them to start accepting that as payment for services? Like if you're a physical therapist, and you're in practice, you're not working through the insurance company because that's, obviously going to be limited at this point in just US dollars. But how do you make the pitch to them? Like, hey, it's probably a good idea to have prices reflected and accept Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, maybe, 10 currencies or something like that. What would your pitch be to convince them to do that?
Well, the pitch has changed since the early days, and I was a little more enthusiastic and idealistic. For one thing, if you're using certain cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin Cash, for example, there's another one called Dash, also known as digital cash, then there's really little to no fees. So if you have a business and you have a credit card processor, I have a couple businesses, and I used to run a physical brick and mortar. So most people are aware there's 2% up to 3% fees, right? So you can avoid that altogether. Lets you keep more of your money. Maybe you can pass on some of those savings to your clients. The unfortunate thing is there's not a whole lot of people that are using cryptocurrency right now. And of course, this is a chicken and the egg scenario. So if someone's passionate about cryptocurrency or they want to be cutting edge, then they can help us to give people more places to spend their cryptocurrency, right? And then the more places there are to spend the cryptocurrency, the more people will be inclined to use cryptocurrency as a medium of exchange. There is still to this day some marketing opportunity there. So if you have a business or a shop, you put out in your social media, hey, we're accepting cryptocurrency now. And it's kind of a fun, exciting thing. And there could be some people in your area or people in need of your services that are excited about that. And maybe they'll choose you over one of your competitors because they're excited about cryptocurrency as well. If you are in a health industry like myself that's controversial, I sell kratom and CBD and Delta 8 THC. These are all just plant medicines, little to no side effects, especially when compared to pharmaceuticals. No offense if anyone's prescribing hardcore opioids or anything like that out there. But the government is not very fond of kratom, and they're not very fond of cannabis either, in large part because there's a lot of people using these natural plants that stop using pharmaceuticals. Even Adderall, my girlfriend stopped Adderall and stopped drinking altogether and used kratom instead to do that. The government puts pressure on banks, which put pressure on credit card companies. So I can't accept credit cards for my controversial health products. So sure. I know there are some modalities out there, some Eastern medicine stuff that perhaps it's difficult to obtain credit card processing. But for those types of businesses, specifically a little edgy health, which is my favorite type of health practices. If the FDA doesn't like it, then there's probably something to it. That's my policy. But definitely in those cases, there's most definitely a benefit. But outside, it's just one of those being ahead of the curve things. I think more and more people are going to be using cryptocurrency in commerce, especially these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin Cash, which is geared towards that. Especially if you have an online store, e-commerce makes it really easy to conduct business. You don't have to worry about sending over your credit card number, which can be hacked or leaked. So there's some use cases. I still think, even though, cryptocurrency is talked about on CNBC now and Fox Business Channel and all these big institutions are getting involved, I still think folks that get involved now, especially businesses, are still pretty far ahead of the curve. So there is some opportunity there. I always argue the best way to obtain cryptocurrency rather than buying it is to receive it in exchange for goods and services. So for folks that are wanting to invest or protect their wealth personally, that's a great way to get it as well, just to offer it up for goods and services.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of a situation like, most people are, well, let's say, look at physicians. If they're in a 5 or 6 physician group, let's say they do internal medicine or they're surgeons, and 5% of their business patients decide to pay in cryptocurrency, you wouldn't even necessarily, you could take the currency and then sell it when you cash out, right, through an exchange, or you can just give it to your partners and say, hey, you just got Bitcoin without a fee. Like, normally if you go to buy Bitcoin at Coinbase or some other, like you said, you're paying a couple percent, right? And so now this is a way of, what is it, agorism? Is that the term for where you actually trade goods? And so it's sort of like a way of trading a service for, not a chickens, but in this case it'd be for sort of like another investment.
Agorism more specifically is when you do it, but you do it outside of the scope of the government. So you purposefully transact in cryptocurrency or other things so as to avoid the man and avoid regulations and all that stuff. Agorism is like a edgy, it's like libertarianism, but active and deliberately trying to evade the government. In fact, that's one of the definitions: to evade or defy the state is agorism. But yeah, if a firm or a consortium of doctors were to receive cryptocurrency, they can actually hold the cryptocurrency. And there's many smart companies now that are holding some of their treasury. So if there's a company that's doing well and they're starting to amass a little war chest, it's actually oftentimes better to hold it, or at least hold a little chunk of it in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, because the value tends to go up, whereas the value of the dollar is constantly going down.
Right. And that's not that unusual. There are lots of businesses that own assets, like whether it's stocks or bonds. And so it'd just be another asset class that you could have, that you hold, and it has value. And I guess I don't know exactly what the tax implications would be that for the end of the year if you don't spool it out, if you get hit with business tax and things. I don't know. This is obviously not a financial advice, planning sort of show.
Well, it would be income if someone paid you with the Bitcoin, but then if you never transferred it to another currency or sold out of it, there wouldn't be a second taxable event, just the money coming in, just as though you were receiving dollars or PayPal, for example. I forgot one other go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
One other benefit for a merchant would be there's fewer chargebacks. So sometimes people will come and they'll use someone else's card, or they'll commit fraud, or you'll provide services, or you'll provide them with the goods, and then they go and try to get their credit card to do a chargeback. You got to deal, and it's a headache for any business owner to deal with that. Oftentimes, even though you fulfilled your end of the deal, their bank is still like, no, we're still not, we're not, you guys are losing over there. And you're like, what am I supposed to do now? I rendered the service. With Bitcoin, once the money is sent to your wallet, the people can't get it back. So there's a little bit of protection there. And, if you do a lot of transactions, that actually can end up being a substantial saving for a business.
Sure. Well, let's talk about decentralized finance, because I think this is, I feel like in the mainstream, I'm now starting to see people mention this on CNBC or wherever. Can you briefly describe what DeFi? Because I can absolutely see how this is relevant to someone who has their own business. Yeah, and I know that in a part of your personal Telegram group, or at least where you're talking about how you were using DeFi personally. So it'd be interesting to get your own personal story too of how it worked out for you.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. I was really excited about cryptocurrency early on, and I don't know, time has passed, so a little bit of that excitement faded. Now it's kind of being normalized, right? But I'm really excited about the opportunities for disruption with decentralized finance. So, of course, you have centralized finance and traditional finance. These are financial instruments, but people know what finance is, right? Investing, interest-bearing investments, exchanges, stock markets, all this good stuff, and specifically the functions that a bank would provide. Well, historically, these financial institutions and instruments have been centralized, and we have to trust these parties in order to do business with them. Now, sometimes they're corrupted, sometimes there's funny business. Like, remember recently Wells Fargo was like shaving from people's checking accounts or something?
Right.
Like, wow, Wells Fargo. HSBC was engaged in money laundering for Mexican cartels. Like, wow. But on top of that, a lot of brokers and agents and centralized financial institutions, more so than serving their clients, they are seeking profit through fees, right? There's fees for everything. So now with the advent of cryptocurrency, which is decentralized, now we have decentralized finance. And specifically what this means is, rather than doing business with a centralized institution that's going to take a fee at every single level, whether you're buying it or selling it or whatever, and also you have to trust that they're not going to be corrupt and that they're going to be good stewards of your money, and they're not going to be investing more than they really have on or doing fractional reserve banking. We now have the ability to do these types of financial instruments, but instead of doing them with a centralized company, we're doing them with what's called a smart contract. So some of these cryptocurrencies and blockchains, like Ethereum, for example, they're what's called a Turing complete blockchain. People don't need to know that term, but I learned that term a little while before I did the workshop. I was like, oh, I didn't know that's what that term meant. But essentially that means it's a highly programmable instrument, right? So now we have a blockchain where we can write computer programs on top of them. And a smart contract essentially is a contract that's coded into a blockchain. The benefit of this is that nobody controls it. It's open source, so anyone can see the code. People don't know what JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs are doing when they're trading and all this derivatives and credit default swaps and all this nonsense that got us into trouble, I guess, over a decade now. Wow. So now we have decentralized finance. So what's the practical implication of that? One of the biggest uses for that is for folks that have amassed cryptocurrency. So let's say that you've managed to amass $100,000 worth of cryptocurrency. But now all of a sudden there's an emergency, or perhaps you and your spouse are about to have a child, so you want to add on a new room for the nursery. Well, you know that cryptocurrency is going to continue to go up in value, more than likely. I don't know for a fact, but chances are it's going to go up. Right. So you're hesitant to sell your cryptocurrency, but you've been putting so much of your money into the cryptocurrency that you have a whole lot of cryptocurrency. So one thing that people can do now, and this is what I specifically did recently, you can take your cryptocurrency, you can put it up as collateral and lock it into a smart contract. That smart contract will then generate what's known as stable coins. These are cryptocurrencies that are specifically pegged to the US dollar. right? So you put your cryptocurrency up as collateral. This computer program, this decentralized smart contract, then generates stable coins for you. You then take your stable coins, you convert it to fiat or US dollars. You spend the money for the construction, or maybe it's even the down payment on a construction loan, but ideally you're doing it without the banks. And then you do your construction. And now, instead of paying back a bank with substantial amounts of interest, you pay back the smart contract. And as soon as you pay back that stable coin that was loaned to you by the smart contract, you get access to your cryptocurrency again. This is really groundbreaking stuff. And that's just one of the use cases. You can supply the cryptocurrency as collateral, and then you get a loan. Now you pay interest. They have different names for it, but essentially it's interest with an APY. You pay interest, but also the money that you supply is collecting interest as well. And so oftentimes those either cancel one another out, or you're just paying, 1% or less than 1% on your money, which is oftentimes a better loan than you're going to get from old JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs. So if you don't need to do the loan, you can simply supply that cryptocurrency for other people to take loans off of, and you earn interest on that as well. That's just one of the applications of decentralized finance. And I used it personally. We just, my girlfriend and I closed on 10 acres about 2 months ago, 2 houses on the property. And so she wanted to paint it from the get-go, but her family, who lives in Florida and Arizona, they're coming over for her birthday in a couple months. So that accelerated our timeline to get the house painted.
I know. Yeah, you're going to say
it. So she's like, we got to get it painted. I'm like, whoa, slow down. Well, I had just bought $5,000 worth of Ethereum a few months ago. And so she's like, we got to pay for this. I'm like, well, I don't want to pull more money out. I like my money to stay in the business and earn more money by investing in my own business. So I was like, well, I just got this Ethereum that I bought recently. Maybe I could finally try out this decentralized finance thing. So I bought the Ethereum around $1,930, which is interesting because I was originally involved in the Ethereum crowd sale when it was like 17 or 70 cents for Ethereum. Now it's like $2,600. Yeah. I didn't hold on to that Ethereum, of course. It'd be a whole different story if I did. But I took the $5,000 worth of Ethereum that I purchased with dollars when Ethereum was like $1,930. I put it up as the supply, my collateral. I used an institution called Compound. It's a decentralized finance app. They're called dApps, decentralized applications. So this $5,000 worth of Ethereum was put up as collateral. Now, these dApps oftentimes have a collateralization ratio. So you have to over collateralize. So you put up $5,000 bucks. I got $3,500 worth of the stable coin. Took the $3,500, which was less than the 75% collateralization ratio. I'll share one of the big risks with this process. So I took the $3,500, converted it back to fiat, got the $3,500, paid for my half of the painting, and then boom, that's done. They painted the house. It looks great, right? And so now I'm slowly but surely going to pay back that $3,500. And when I do, I get access to my cryptocurrency. Now, the cool thing is I bought the cryptocurrency at $1,930, and now it's like $2,600. So not only am I getting this very low interest loan, it comes out to like 0.94% interest. Not only am I getting this low interest loan, yeah, it's actually like over 4% on the loan, but because I'm getting rewards for supplying my money, it comes out to 0.94%, which is really cool. And so now, mind you, some of that, they give you this compound token. So they're calculating, they generate their own token, but that token has significant value, and it's a popular coin. It's not just some run of the mill coin. So here's the big risk. So that all worked. It's working right now. Now I haven't put all the money back in and got my Ethereum back, but billions of dollars are tied up in these smart contracts. So I trust that it's work. It's not just a fly by night kind of deal. But here's the risk. You got to be really cautious of this if someone were to dabble in this. So it's easy when someone puts up, a house, like equity in their house for collateral, because it has pretty stable value, right? Well, these cryptocurrencies change value. So if you put up $5,000 worth of Ethereum and then you get $3,500, well, what happens if the price of Ethereum goes from $2,600 or $1,930 when I went in to $1,800 or $1,500, right? So you have to maintain that 25% ratio. And if it goes down, the ratio between your collateral and your loan, if it goes down beneath 75%, then the contract can be liquidated. That's where other parties come in and they buy out that contract. And if that happens, you get to keep the stable coins, your $3,500, but you lose the Ethereum. So it's something you got to be conservative if you're playing this game. You got to over collateralize, even probably I would suggest more so than that 75% ratio. So I'm going to start paying mine was kind of an experiment. I could have just paid dollars at the end of the day, but so I'm going to pay it back in like $500 or $1,000 chunks so I can make sure I get that Ethereum back. But that would be my tip for folks, to make sure that you over collateralize and start small too, that you don't want to go in and your first time, buy a house with this.
Right. Yeah. That's really fascinating because I mean, you can definitely see the applications for this. And to our earlier discussion, if you started accepting cryptocurrency as a practice and you had a pile of it sitting there, you could say, hey, we can use this to upgrade our exam rooms or add buy some equipment or something like that, which we're going to
launch a marketing
which will bring more revenue in, right? Like I'm looking at my plastic surgeons, you have to buy a laser for skin treatment and things. And that's not cheap, not surprising. And so they have to take out a loan. So I guess the one part I didn't quite catch or understand is, so you said the actual interest rate after sort of arbitrage ends up about a little less than 1%. Is that because are you staking your collateral? So it's when we talked earlier about staking, that you actually get an APY on your stake when you get paid back in whatever the currency is, right? Either stable coin or in this case, Ethereum. Is that what you mean, that you actually are making interest rate even though you're also have to pay back a certain amount on the loan?
You're getting interest by supplying cryptocurrency to the smart contract. So it's not necessarily a stake. So you earn interest when you supply, even if it's collateral for your own loan. You earn interest and then you pay interest. And so when you add those two together, it definitely takes a big chunk out of the 4% that you were supposed to pay on the stable coin. Now, that was just me doing Ethereum and DAI. The cool thing about this is, like with the Federal Reserve, you have the Fed board and the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and they set interest rates arbitrarily in order to social engineer the United States population. Is really what they're doing. Employment, all this stuff. It's all about control. Well, what we have with DeFi is algorithms, not even algorithms actually, because there's some centralized finance. So you have like banks, and then you have CeFi, like companies like BlockFi or Celsius. These are centralized corporations that are providing the ability for you to put your collateral in crypto and then get a loan. But this is with a company. They arbitrarily are also setting these rates. Well, there's like a free market mechanism encoded in these smart contracts where when there's a bunch of liquidity in this particular currency, a bunch of people are supplying that particular currency, they'll lower the interest rate, right? Or if there's a demand for supply on this side, on the loan side, but there's not a lot of money there, they'll increase the interest rate over here, right? The code will. So it all ends up evening out. Now, mind you, again, it's new and there's some risk involved, but there's also risk involved in, putting your money in one of these banks that's going to go under, right? Just recently, there were some pretty big banks that went under. But it's cool. It's fun. It's experimental. And like you said, that's a great use case. So now we have companies that are putting some of their treasury, or they're just holding assets instead of holding stock or having cash in their savings account. They're starting to hold cryptocurrency. Well, you can gain access to the liquidity associated with that capital by doing these decentralized finance loans.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I mean, that's what happens in a bank, right? You give the bank money, they hold it, but they're not just holding it. It's not in a big vault, right? It's not like the cartoon version. They're loaning that out. They're getting a higher interest rate so they can give you back your 0.01% APY. Yeah, so this is really fascinating. I mean, obviously, one of the downsides of this that you explained is that there's a lot of steps involved, right? Like you have to get it converted to one currency, then you have to go to an exchange, you get it converted to another, and then back and forth. And so that's probably a little bit of monkey business. It's not impossible. And once you get probably used to the space, it's pretty easy. But that's certainly the broader implications of where it can be used. Again, sending money around the world, having people who access to capital that never had access before. It's definitely, I mean, that's pretty exciting possibilities there.
Yeah, it gives folks, there's a lot of people that are unbanked. So it gives all of these folks access to these complex financial instruments as well with just having a smartphone. Now, I will say, every time there's a lot of different steps, and each step along the way is oftentimes an Ethereum transaction, which means you have to pay gas fees. So you have to sign a transaction to authorize the smart contract to do dealings with your wallet, your MetaMask wallet. That's a little $7 transaction fee, right? And then whenever I would sell the DAI, the stable coin, back for US dollars, the exchange charges me a fee, right? So at the end of the day, I'm doing it as an experiment. I'm going to record all the costs and see how it all shakes out at the end of the day. But the beauty is the cryptocurrency more than likely is going up. And like I said, I bought the Ethereum at $1,930 and I've already gone up to $2,600. That's not always the case, but we're in some little bullish cycle again starting up. So I think it's really cool. And just like with the central bank digital currencies, we can expect that old legacy banks, they're either going to have to evolve or die, because this is just going to become, there's going to be killer apps that make this so simple on a smartphone app without having to deal with this complex, this, that, or the other, or understanding how it all works. And the banks they're really going to have a run for their money.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing this all the time in the marketplace. We're seeing this in, Amazon's a good example, the brick and mortars versus online retailers, right? I mean, everyone has to deal with this sort of technology as it changes and how people interact with and get products and services. And so I imagine at many levels, medicine's going to have to deal with this too. I mean, I don't think there's any question that we're going to be challenged by people who are overseas doing things that they are, because right now licensing restricts that, but also obviously physical presence is important, but you're seeing a lot more digital, virtual care in medicine. Yeah. Telemedicine for sure. There's, by putting my hands on you and listening to you I can't do that over a phone, but there's a lot of things you can. And one thing I've noticed too, interacting with my foster son, with his family in Guatemala, they're very poor, but they all have smartphones, and even when we first got him, about 5 years ago, he would have to call them and talk to them. And now he FaceTimes them. They haven't gotten a lot richer, but just the technology and just the expensive of some of the things are so small now. Mm-hmm. That, I think when he left Guatemala, they had one light bulb in his house. Wow. And now they have power. I mean, they got not a lot, but they have some. And so they can charge their phone. I mean, the simple things like that, that's really all you need now for a lot of these things to make it work. And so you can definitely see how the scalability in the third world, but then obviously where we're very rich, we don't have to worry about those things. But I mean, you're just going to see an explosion here, and then the downstream effects they'll feel in the third world. You're doing a seminar in just a couple of days when this releases on cryptocurrency for beginners. Can you describe what you're going to be teaching that? And then we'll have a link to that for people so you can sign up real easily at theparadox.com/crypto, just so you don't have to remember anything. Why don't you just talk about what you're going to be teaching in that course?
Yeah, so I did a workshop back in May, I believe, and ended up doing over 17 hours worth of content. And that one, I like to use the word comprehensive. That was a very comprehensive cryptocurrency
That's
workshop.
One word for it.
Yeah, we went real deep on a lot of technical stuff. This workshop is going to be specifically geared towards beginners. So folks that have been thinking about cryptocurrency, or they heard about it on the news, or maybe they have friends or family that have made a good amount of money, or at least protected their wealth from inflation, but they feel a little hesitant to get involved because I understand it can be quite overwhelming. So what I aim to do is to deliver this complex information, but really make it very, very, very simple, and just share the basic information that's necessary in order to get onboarded into the cryptocurrency space. So we're going to teach people how to go from dollars to cryptocurrency, what kind of exchange to use, how to set that up, how to hold their cryptocurrency safely and securely so they don't have it taken by hackers, or what happens more often than not is user error, like someone loses a password or sends it somewhere that they weren't supposed to send it. We're going to teach people how to avoid all that. We're going to teach people how to gain access to alternative cryptocurrencies. We talked about Ethereum a lot today. That's a lot of potential growth for Ethereum, other cryptocurrencies like Cardano. And we are going to talk a little bit about decentralized finance and some of the basics that people can do to get involved with that as well. So we're going to keep it super, super, super simple. I'm going to take it nice and slow. And for anyone that has been itching to get involved, but just feels like they don't understand it, I'm going to make sure that you leave the workshop with the knowledge and information necessary to get started.
And I'd say if it's anything like the first workshop, you'll leave with a little Bitcoin Cash, because I know you were sending $5 to everybody online, which is amazing that you can actually just take a picture and send it.
That was a lot of work while I was doing the thing, and everyone's like, send it here, send it here, send it here.
I was impressed. I was watching that replay. I'm like, oh, I missed my chance. I'm $5 poorer than I could have been. But now it's actually would have been, it probably brought $8. So
you never got the $5? I'll still send it to you.
We'll work it out sometime.
All right. There's been people after the fact that are like, hey, I never got the $5. What's going on, man?
Well, it's funny. It's been great because I've then got adventures. I actually got some Pirate Chain, which is like a pirate, right? And so I've had a lot of fun with my 15-year-old son. When we golf, if he has a good hole, I just send him some R. And so at the end of the day, he sort of figures out how much he's earned, and then I just send it to him. But it's gotten us used to using it, and it's low stakes, right? We're talking, I'm sending like $1 or $2 at a time. So, and the transaction fee, I think for that is 0.0001 Rs, which is like, I think 0.3 of 1 cent maybe, or something like that So, and I think, and to that point, I think, when we talk about gas fees, which I didn't know, I've heard that term, but I didn't know, that actually is the fee that it costs to send something, right? I mean, that's
on Ethereum.
There are lots of the terminology can be very sort of, overwhelming. It's hard enough to sort of understand the space. And then you hear someone say hodling. I mean, I think that's something. Why did you say what hodl and actually where it came from? Because I think it's pretty funny.
Sure. So people often refer to hodling as a thing that you should do, which you should do. It stands for hold on for dear life, right? And so that was the name of the last course, Demystifying Crypto, how to buy hodl, HODL, and multiply your cryptocurrency. And people were like, I think you spelled hold wrong. But so essentially what it means is whether the price is going up or down, you should hold on for dear life, because it is like a roller coaster. For example, I had someone I consulted back in 2017, and they bought a substantial amount of Bitcoin when the price was $13,000. Well, several months later, the price went down to $3,500.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so I had taught them to hodl, to hold on for dear life. So they held on. Had they sold it at 5,000 or 10,000 or 3,500, then they would have had substantial losses. Well, they held on. We call it having diamond hands. They had diamond hands. And now they're way in the money quite a bit. Bitcoin's like 40,000 now. So they're doing pretty good, sitting pretty well. Well, the genesis of this term was way early on in Bitcoin. Somebody was drunk on a Bitcoin forum, and they were complaining about how the pro traders, they know exactly how to time the market, and they buy at the top and they sell, or they buy at the bottom and they sell at the top. And he always just gets all afraid and sells when the price is going down. And he's like, maybe in the future, I should just hodl. And he misspelled HODL. And he revealed also in that little post that he was whiskey drunk. So stuck around, and it's definitely not, it's not the best piece of advice for all investing, but when it comes to cryptocurrency, chances are in the future, the price is going to be substantially higher than it is today. So you don't want to sell it when the price, say you bought Bitcoin at 40,000 recently, and the price went up to 45,000. And you're like, oh my God, I made more than 10% gain. This is great. And you sell. Wow, you got 10%. Well, you could have held on till the price went up to 60,000, but even then shouldn't sell, because if you truly believe in cryptocurrency, which you should truly believe if you are to get involved, because it is a wild ride. If you truly believe and understand the implications of cryptocurrency, you know that it's highly, highly, highly likely that the price is going to be six figures in only a matter of time. Could go upwards of 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. It's possible that it overtakes gold's market cap, which would make it around $400,000 a unit. So you don't sell if the price goes up 5 or 10%, and you most definitely don't sell if the price goes down 10 to 20%, because chances are it's going to continue its upward trajectory.
I mean, I would think at this point, if you're a financial advisor, again, this is not financial advice, you're taking from an anesthesiologist, so, but it seems like it'd be very reasonable to say that part of your investment portfolio should have some sort of component of cryptocurrency, whether people always say, well, you should have some precious metals like 5-10%, people just make up numbers, I think, but it would seem reasonable that this would be part of your portfolio somewhere in some, whatever, level of risk you have. And I mean, I imagine, right?
Yeah. Commensurate with how much risk someone's willing to take. But I think it was in the last podcast we did, early on, the whole narrative was, well, we can't invest in Bitcoin. It's too risky. It's too volatile. Well, now that's been flipped around, and it may be too risky to only have dollar-based assets, because while Bitcoin can go up 20% and down 30%, and it's all pretty crazy, we know for sure that the United States dollar is consistently losing value year over year. And that's only accelerated with all of this COVID-19 economic crisis and all of the bailouts. And like, everyone's paying attention to these stimulus packages. Meanwhile, trillions of dollars went out directly to the banks through the Federal Reserve's discount window, which is them just creating new money and giving it to banks and big corporations.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's definitely a good move. Not financial advice, but if someone's conservative, even just a little 5% piece, look at some of the big companies are starting to do it. Some of the big banks are starting to do it. So, another reason why it would be valuable for someone to accept cryptocurrency, a business, you brought up too, like, just to get some experience with it, because it's best to be ahead of these trends rather than catching up when everyone else is already involved. And most definitely, cryptocurrency is here to stay, and it's only going to become more predominant in everyone's financial life, and more than just your financial life, your business life, your record keeping, health as well, secure health information being stored on a blockchain, encrypted.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I wanted my son to start using, because I'm like, by the time he's my age, it's going to be commonplace. And so the sooner he sort of gets comfortable with the process and understands it, and the sooner I do, because frankly, I'd rather try and learn it when I'm in my 40s than I'm in my 70s. Because it's like, I've watched my parents trying to, my dad still refers to my smartphone as a gizmo. So I think it's important to try get that stuff ahead of time. And I think it's real important for businesses probably to, like you said, probably to try and look into trade and accepting it, because it's probably where we're going to end up. Unless you think we're not going to end up with the as a common source of exchange at times, which I think at this point, I think you have to be, I think it'd be a mistake to think that that's not where we're headed on some level, what percentage of sales and such. So I think it probably,
well, if it's not direct cryptocurrency that people are using, the cryptocurrency or blockchain is going to underpin whatever medium of exchange they're using. If it's an app, or if it's scan this or whatever, it's more than likely going to be sent on a blockchain.
Yeah. And you can certainly imagine a world which Bitcoin, maybe it's not Bitcoin, but it's some cryptocurrency, is the standard where, you measure your currencies against, right? And so, right now the dollar is the reserve currency. You could imagine at some point that it will get replaced by a currency that is going to maintain its value, and that there are going to be other countries that are not going to want to deal with the U.S. inflationary rate, which right now is low, but it could certainly change, whenever. We don't know when. And if that's the case, then you can definitely see why you'd want to peg it to something else, and it's something that you feel that is more stable. And so I think that's always an advantage for holding that. And the one thing I'd like to add that we haven't talked about, but maybe is obvious to some, so you don't actually have to buy one of whatever it is. So you don't have to buy like one Bitcoin, because some might say, oh, well, I don't have $40,000 to put into it. You can buy, a small fraction of one, and even if you go to the right places, the fees still make it reasonable to do, right? So, if you want a dollar cost average, people like to do that sometimes with their investments. I think it's reasonable to do those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, that's good. I just took a note to make sure to include that in my stuff. A lot of people aren't familiar with that. Yeah, you can buy 1/10 of a Bitcoin, 100th of a Bitcoin. And there's only ever going to be 21 million of those coins that are mined, right? And a lot of them have been lost to error, computer got shut down. A lot of them are held by this mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto character that haven't moved at all since they were mined in 2009. So after you subtract some of the lost cryptocurrency, there's probably only ever going to be like 17 million of them. And there's a whole lot of people that are competing to gain access to those cryptocurrencies. So it may reach a point where it's like, they'll call them whole Bitcoiners. The people that have at least one whole Bitcoin are in a super wealthy class. So there's still, even though it's $40,000, I've been telling people for years now, since the price was less than $1,000, to get to the left of the decimal point, meaning to try to accumulate at least a whole Bitcoin. I've been telling people when it was 1,000, when it was 10,000, when it was 60,000. Now I'm telling people when it's 40,000, do what you can to at least get a whole one of these, because as they become fewer and fewer and more scarce, and more people want them, and central banks continue to debase the currency, they're going to be in high demand. And it is, seemed like a pipe dream at one point for Bitcoin to be some sort of global reserve currency or some major asset class. And now it's like, I don't know, the top 7th most valuable asset in the entire world. I think it's overpassed Tesla. It's coming for Apple and Google, right? And gold's up there in the number 1 spot, over $10 trillion. Well, Bitcoin, the overall cryptocurrency market cap, meaning all of the cryptocurrencies times all the cryptocurrencies value, is like $1.66 trillion. That's a big deal. And it's here to stay. It's entirely possible that Bitcoin becomes like this global digital gold. It has many of the properties that gold has. It has many improvements on gold. A lot of people don't dabble in gold. They want to invest significant wealth in gold, but it's like, where do you put the gold?
Yeah,
what if
right.
you need to travel? What if you need to use some of that gold to buy assets or land or something like that? It's very impractical. Well, you can keep hundreds of millions of dollars worth of digital gold, Bitcoin, on a little piece of paper with your private seed written down, or on a USB flash drive. So the implications are pretty far reaching. And it's still early.
Right. Not everyone has a Scrooge McDuck vault where they can just swim in gold coins, right? Well, John Bush, thanks so much for joining me from the Live Free Academy. You can go to livefree.academy. You can go check out his course if you want to. An easy link is, if you don't want to go through his website, you can certainly get theparadox.com/crypto. And you can check out the show notes for this page, which will have access to your social media and other ways to get a hold of John if you want to, at theparadox.com/141, or last episode, which is theparadox.com/140. So John, thanks again so much, and happy investing.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Dr. Aaron Wiseman. If you're coaching curious or a coach yourself, please check out Physician Coaching Alliance at drpodcastnetwork.com/Physician Coaching Alliance.
Thanks for listening to The Paradox. If you like what the doc is doing, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And share the show with your friends. Become a supporting listener to get access to special bonuses at patreon.com/theparadox. Show notes can be found at theparadox.com.